Welcome back, everyone. Welcome to the second of our 3 poster sessions at Nature-Based Solutions Digital Dialogues. The topic for this session reflects the content of our 2 panel sessions for today, Nature-Based Solutions with, by and for people, and Nature-Based Solutions and Biodiversity. It is a very great pleasure that I hand over to Dr. Stephen Wernicki. Stephen is a postdoc at Linköping University in Sweden and a senior associate at NbS. He has a PhD in sustainability science from Lund University, in which he focused on the social dimensions of nature-based responses to climate change. Prior to that, he worked for UNEP's World Conservation Monitoring Center in their climate change and biodiversity program. And he will be moderating this session. Over to you, Stephen.
Thank you, Natalie. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you really well. Thanks.
Okay, welcome everyone. I hope you're doing very well wherever you're beaming in from around the world. I'm amazed to see that there is a conference feel developing despite our dislocation, and I hope that we can continue that during this poster presentation. So it's my great pleasure to be able to moderate this session. We'll get 6 insights into the science and practice of nature-based solutions. So today we've been talking about the social and the biodiversity dimensions of nature-based solutions, and we'll keep that going for this poster session. We also get the chance now to bring those themes together. And so extra points to those of you who pose questions that link the social dimensions with the biodiversity dimensions of NbS. So this poster session is a chance to dig deeper into cutting-edge science and practice of nature-based solutions, and I think also to further understand the processes and decisions that go into them. To get a closer look at each of the posters, you can download them from the conference website. We have 6 great poster presenters for you. They are Claire Barrett-Mould from the UK Environment Agency, Annie Weldon from the University of Oxford, Karl Anderson from the University of Glasgow, Gerd Lupp from the Technical University of Munich, Marina Melanidis from the University of British Columbia, and also the co-founder of Youth for Nature, and Linjin Xie from Durham University. So don't hesitate to send in your questions, as you've been so brilliant at doing so far in the conference. And I'll read out 1 question for each of the presenters after the presentation, and then we'll see how much time there is left after the presenters are done. Also, don't forget to tweet if you use Twitter at #DigitalDialogues. So without further ado then, 5 minutes. Claire, it's over to you.
Thank you, Stephen. Hi, everyone. So as Stephen mentioned, my name's Claire Barrett-Mould. I'm a senior environmental project manager at the Environment Agency. And I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the natural flood management that we're undertaking with the Leeds City Council as part of the flood alleviation scheme in Leeds in the north of England. So Leeds Natural Flood Management Scheme forms part of the 2nd phase of the Leeds Flood Alleviation Scheme. The aim of the NFM project is to complement the traditional hard defences in the city centre by increasing the ability of the upstream catchment to store water. The NFM project is an £8 million project and covers a catchment area of 687 kilometres squared, stretching from Leeds northwest to near Skipton and beyond to the Yorkshire-Lancashire border. And this scale currently makes it the largest NFM project in the UK. So the primary aim of the project is to decrease the flood risk in Leeds city centre by up to 5%. And this will account for the effects of climate change. It also means that the height of the walls in the city centre don't need to be built so high. So we're going to achieve this 5% reduction in flood risk by implementing a number of different natural flood management measures, such as woodland creation, floodplain restoration and reconnection, and moorland restoration. The project itself runs from 2018 to 2025, but because of the nature of NFM and the time it takes to establish and become most effective, the flood benefits of the project are expected to be realised between 2039 and 2069. But in addition to the flood risk benefits, the projects are also going to achieve numerous additional benefits, such as increased biodiversity, carbon capture, community engagement and education, most of which will have an immediate effect on the catchment. Because of the scale of the project, and we're developing a number of innovative approaches to delivering NFM in the catchment. So we're developing a GIS platform, which will allow us to identify areas in the catchment which will be most beneficial and suitable for NFM. So the map you can see on the poster gives an example of the environmental screening we're able to do to identify areas where environmental sensitivities may be a constraint to delivering NFM, with the red areas being those with the most constraints through to green with no identified constraints. Another approach we're taking is to develop a landowner engagement team in partnership with the local community forest group, which in this case is the White Rose Forest. This team will be able to use their expertise to build relationships with landowners. They'll also be able to use the GIS platform, taking iPads out on site with them to develop concept designs on site with the landowner, which takes into account all of the data and information we have available for the site, together with any information they gather whilst there. And then using all this information, we can indicate which NFM measures will be the most suitable in this location. And from that can produce a concept design there and then, which the landowner can have full input to. And then one last quick bit of information about the approach we're taking is the partnership we have with Leeds City Council Plant Nursery, who will be growing the 1 million plus trees that we're going to be planting in the catchment during the lifetime of the project. So that's been a really quick overview of the project. I'm happy to answer any questions. If you'd like to get in touch, my email is on the poster, so yeah, feel free to drop me an email. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire. Really interesting stuff, and really, really valuable to get this on the ground experience that you've got through this project as well. So we have a question then about this 5% figure that you've started your poster presentation with. Yep. So the question has two parts really. It's first of all, what's the uncertainty related to that 5% figure? Is that likely to change once you see the project, implemented? How sure are you that 5% figure will be the final figure, if you like? And then the other part of the question then is that enough? Yeah. And I suppose if you want to talk even further, then what kinds of time frames are we talking about? Is it 5%, as you said, 2018 to 25? But then what happens after that?
Yeah. So I'll answer the last bit of the question first, which is the timescales. So our ambition is to get that 5% delivered by 2069. And so that will allow for the trees to grow and to become that they're most effective by that time. So the 5% is a reduction in the flood peak on a 1 in 200 year event. And the primary aim of it was to account for the climate change element of the flood scheme. Is it enough? Probably you could do more, and we will, as part of the project, we're basically going to deliver as much NFM as we can in the catchment, which then may end up being greater than 5%. It is difficult to model, and that is the approach that we're taking to monitoring the benefits, is via modeling. And so the level of uncertainty is quite high due to that. but we think we can achieve a 5% reduction in that timescale.
Okay, thank you so much. Really detailed, comprehensive answer there, and a great presentation as well. More questions coming in, but we're going to move on now so that we make sure we have enough time for everyone. Thank you so much. I know that you have to go at past, so yeah, we really appreciate your participation. And don't hesitate to email Claire either. Her email is there on the poster. Okay, so now on to the next presenter, Annie Weldon, with something a little bit different.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Stephen. As Stephen said, I'm Annie Weldon. I'm from Oxford School of Geography and the Environment, and this poster makes up a significant part of the research that I've been doing over the last year and a half, investigating potentials for multi-species collaborations within NbS infrastructures. So thanks so much for having me here to present it today amongst a slew of really talented practitioners and scholars. And over the last day or so, speaking of, we've heard a lot of discussion around humans working with nature, but nature is not just one thing. It's not homogeneous, as we on the biodiversity panel just discussed over the last hour or so. So in this context of a complex biodiverse nature, what does working with these elements look like? And more importantly, what does it look like to work well with nature in NbS? And I answer these questions alongside a question and case study story about NbS infrastructures, which include animals, and notably beaver dams. So kind of adding an alternative or additional perspective onto Claire's natural flood management with beavers as a really key player agent in natural flood management. And I'm taking you in this poster and through my field work to Northern California, in which beavers have been enrolled in natural flood management projects there. And I take a social scientific perspective. I conducted semi-structured interviews and go-alongs, which is a shadowing method with key players, human players in that area. So I spoke with restorationists, people who had their own beaver organizations, municipal, city government officials, etc., to glean what does working with nature look like. So to give you a bit more context in Northern California and kind of pose to you beaver dams as nature-based solutions, you can look down to the bottom left-hand corner of the poster. Beavers are called keystone species or ecological engineers due to the infrastructures or dams that they build. These dams increase biodiversity, they mitigate floods in some cases, they prevent fires and droughts, especially in the case of California, and across Northern America and or North America and Europe, they retain carbon in the creation of wetlands. And I noticed in Northern California, beavers and humans really work together to build these hybrid collaborative dams in the form of flow devices. So you can see in that picture in the bottom left-hand corner, there's a pipe going through a dam in which the beavers built the dam and then the humans installed the pipe in order to control the flow of water through the dam so that it wasn't spilling out onto roads, flooding houses, etc. And by studying this, I found two really key findings from this study. First, I looked at animal infrastructure through animal labor. And normally animal labor you think of as studied in domesticated animals or farm animals. But in this case, we see animal labor functioning as a key element within NbS, beavers building, right? And there were three forms of emergent labor which emerged from my conversations with the people working with beavers in this space. The first being free labor. This was kind of constituted by the conversations of ecosystem services, beavers as a cost-effective natural flood management technique, they work for free, etc. Moving along, the second was relatable labor. Now this I found the people working with beavers had could really relate to them, you know, 9-to-5 job, working really hard in restoration, in addition to them being cute and cuddly. And what this relatable perception or imaginary did was that it set the stage for collaborative labor. And that's where humans and the beavers could collaborate and really work well with nature. So the collaborative labor is an alternative logic to the ecosystem services free labor logic that we're seeing in NbS. And NbS have the potential to shift human environment relations by situating humans as a part of the environment, collaborating with a biodiverse nature. So the significance for NbS really comes out in that working with nature is done well when A, collaborative labor is achieved, and B, NbS is framed as a multi-species system with humans within it. As we were speaking about social ecological systems, they're always intertwined and really cannot be separated, the human from the nature. So NbS tells us the story, as do beavers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Annie, so much for a really fascinating, and I would like to say also constructively provocative presentation. You bringing in the environmental humanities into nature-based solutions discussions, you know, that's really groundbreaking work. So see yourself as a forerunner, and I'm a fan. Look forward to see more of that. So we have a question then, and you can choose to answer it how you would like to, I think. So there is according to the question, there is a lot of space in the US, say. There's less space in Europe, perhaps especially in the UK with its high population density and so on. Is it realistic to scale up NbS mediated by animals like beavers when we think about the trade-offs and potential conflicts with farmers, for example? So as I said, choose how you would like to answer that yourself, whether you agree with the tenets as well.
No, of course. So just kind of to set that context and respond to the first part of the question, yes, there is a lot more space in the US. However, as posed in a book on beavers by Poliquin and Beaver Imaginaries, humans and beavers, due to the fact that they were pretty much eradicated in Europe and then eradicated in the US, they haven't really coexisted anywhere until this moment in time, in this rewilding moment. So even though there's more space in different places, now even in the US, humans and beavers are living in close proximity. And that spatial issue, it does become, you know, gives rise to a lot of beaver animal or beaver human conflicts, as I found in my research. But the scaling up of beavers, and I mean, this is one particular animal infrastructure. I think it is possible, especially given the invention of these flow control devices. There are a lot of different organizations working with them, at least in the US, and they've been brought over here as well a few times. And the flow control devices, what they do is they allow the beaver pond to still exist and the beavers to still, you know, increase biodiversity in that pond, you know, create more space for other species, while also allowing the humans to have an element of control over how deep that pond gets. So while flow control devices aren't necessarily a way to let the beavers, you know, really have full agency over the infrastructure, they do kind of have, it is a way to work with nature and coexist, and a way to scale up and have these benefits.
Very, very interesting. Thank you so much. So hopefully we'll have the chance to come back to that, your presentation later on. But now then we're going to move on to Karl Anderson. So Karl, your 5 minutes. Take it away.
Just waiting to see my poster come up there. There we go. Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for the introduction, Stephen. So my name is Karl Anderson. I'm a PhD researcher at the University of Glasgow, and my research is conducted within the context of an EU-funded project. It's the Operandum project. This work is done in collaboration with my supervisor, Fabrice Renaud. And I'm going to talk about a literature review we conducted on the how and the why of increasing public acceptance of NbS. And first of all, we define public acceptance as just very broadly positive attitudes and or positive behaviors towards NbS, so that exists kind of on a spectrum. And to set a bit of the background of the research, so why is this important? First of all, public participation and integration of local knowledge are increasingly relied on for disaster risk reduction. But there's a certain kind of precondition of a certain level of public acceptance before that level of engagement is actually possible. And furthermore, because NbS are multifunctional and embedded in social ecological systems, they rely more on values and societal interests than traditional gray infrastructure measures. So this also brings public acceptance to the forefront. So in the review, we synthesized recommendations and lessons learned for how to increase public acceptance of NbS, and then use comparison with gray measures as a kind of backdrop to that. And then also look at what are the potential positive outcomes of public acceptance for NbS projects. So the research design, it's a literature review. So we conducted keyword search in Scopus and came out with 99 peer-reviewed articles, 65 of which describe NbS and 28 of which describe more traditional gray infrastructure measures. So jumping to the results, first of all, the how. So how do we increase public acceptance of NbS? And we've synthesized from the literature to create this framework, the PA NbS framework. And if you look at starting at the bottom of the framework, we have these 4 main recommendations. So these are provide benefits, increase awareness of benefits, communicate effectively, and promote participation and collaboration. And within each of these 4 primary recommendations, there are 4 success criteria. So for example, for increased awareness of benefits, the benefit should be attributable to the measure, salient, evidence-based, and culturally significant, ideally. These recommendations are then modulated by and operate within the context of a number of intermediary factors. And these factors are found at the nexus of the individual, the society, and the NbS itself. So we actually identified 36 factors in the paper, and there's just some of the more important ones are highlighted here. So for example, for the individual, their past experience with the measure or with the hazard, their risk perception, more for the society, so that all the competing societal interests, and then also the perceived effectiveness of the NbS itself. In addition to the perceived ecosystem services from the NbS by individuals and society. So this all leads to public acceptance, which is manifested through attitudes and behaviors towards the NbS. So that's the how. What about the why? So why should we focus more on increasing public acceptance? So we've drawn out the top 10 positive outcomes of public acceptance from the literature in terms of their percent frequency. So how many times are they mentioned in the articles describing NbS and gray measures? And at the top there, cooperative maintenance and management was the most frequently mentioned. If you skip down to number 3, that's highlighted in green because it's mentioned at least twice as frequently for NbS articles when compared to gray articles describing gray measures. So protection against competing societal interests, more important for NbS. Sustainable use, long-term sustainable use, upscaling and repetition, cooperation of various stakeholders during different project phases was also found to be more important just based on the frequency in the articles. So quickly, a couple of the limitations. We don't want to give the impression that the public is a harmonious or homogeneous group, and any efforts to increase public acceptance should ideally segment the public accordingly, as well as focus on specific outcomes. So in terms of behavior change, for example, is more complex and may involve a number of other kind of strategies that can be implemented. So the conclusions to finish, really a need to go beyond one-way education campaigns and kind of just presenting pro-NbS evidence to the public, and going beyond that in terms of actually increasing the awareness of benefits actively for stakeholders, and really focusing on all of these different potential success factors and intermediary factors that can influence public acceptance for the long-term success and sustainable continued uptake of NbS projects. So I'll stop there, and my email address is on the poster, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Karl. Really good stuff there. And I mean, I think I can speak for the NbS community when I say that I look forward to seeing this out there published, because of course it's very valuable evidence for, I would say, whoever is working on NbS, no matter whether you would consider yourself a social scientist or not. So there's plenty, of course, to unpack here. One question we've had to kick us off is about hybrid approaches. So this combination of grey and green. And I mean, first of all, then, I suppose the question would be, did you find these examples? If so, what kinds of results did you observe there? And if you didn't find them, perhaps you could speculate on what kinds of outcomes or public acceptance you'd expect from hybrid grey-green approaches.
Sure. Yeah, it's a good question. So whenever you do anything with NbS, you know, the first step is kind of defining what you're talking about specifically. And so for us, we actually started with categorization of the literature in those very terms, in terms of green, hybrid, or gray. And what we ended up doing was just combining the hybrid with the green measures. So the NbS for us, we're including any measure that includes some organic element, so some natural element, that also aims to, as a primary focus, aims to contribute co-benefits resulting from that natural element. So that's the kind of broad definition we've taken. And it's just, if you try to be more specific than that, it does get really complicated, because of course some measures have some small gray element and others have, you know, a large gray element. So there's some fine lines to be drawn there. In terms of the difference in results, I mean, I think that's kind of borne out already in the results shown here. I mean, there's such a wide variety of NbS, obviously, so it's difficult to, you know, give an answer without going into any kind of specific intervention. But I think just generally in the table on positive outcomes shown there, I mean, those are things that when there is a natural element, things like long-term sustainable use do just kind of inherently become more important, it would seem. So despite them being gray, hybrid measures as opposed to purely green measures.
Okay, thank you so much. Hopefully we'll get the chance to come back to your results later on. So now we're going to move on and we turn to Gerd Lupp now. I hope I'm pronouncing your name okay. Thank you very much, Gerd.
Yes, thank you very much for your introducing words. I hope my audio and video works. My name is Gerd Lupp. I'm a researcher at Technical University of Munich, and I'm actually a trained forester, but in recent years I really have worked a lot with stakeholder involvement and participation. And this is also my part of FUSICOS. So before I start talking about the participatory approaches, I will just briefly introduce FUSICOS. FUSICOS, meaning according to nature in Greek, is a Horizon 2020 funded innovation action project. It intends to demonstrate and implement nature-based solutions in rural mountain areas. And as you can see on the poster, so there are a number of innovation actions. So stakeholder participation through living labs is one aspect. And there are also other work packages dealing with many, many different aspects of nature-based solutions. So for example, a comprehensive framework for assessing, monitoring, verifying aspects of nature-based solution performances, governance aspects. Then there will be also a work package dealing with learning arenas, and also there will be a data platform. So if you look at the poster, so there's also a little map on it. So the project actually has 3 large-scale demonstrator sites where measures are implemented in so-called living lab processes. And the living lab processes are at each site. So we have 3 sites, as I mentioned. So they are the Pyrenees, where it's planned to implement nature-based solutions on both the Spanish and the French side. Then we have a study area in Italy, the Sergio River Basin. And finally, as the third large-scale demonstrator sites, we have Gudbrandsdalen in Norway. Then we have 2 accompanying concept cases. So one is the Kaunertal in Austria. And this is a concept case that develops actually a novelty nature-based solution. And finally, the area that I'm also involved in is the Isar River Basin concept case, which is serving as a learning case for the project. Here we already have an implemented river restoration measure that used actually a living lab approach, and it was very successful, actually won an award and for good practice, and it's considered a good or best practice for, example to follow. So in this poster, we focus a bit on the aspect of stakeholder participation using actually the living labs or living lab approach as one of the innovation actions. So the idea of a living lab is that it actually involves all stakeholders from the different sectors that you have. So it's involving academia, involving the private sector, such as companies, planning offices. It involves the public sectors, such as administrations and decision makers, and as well as the civil society. And the idea is that these four groups meet together on a similar equal ground, and they stepwise together co-explore, they select, they plan, co-design, implement, and monitor nature-based solutions. And this way you see it on the poster in the middle. So you form this quadruple helix innovation networks, which is the character of a living lab. So how does it work? So the facilitators of each of the sites hosting such processes start with identifying relevant stakeholders and bring them together in these living lab processes. And they use a number of different formats, such as workshops, field trips, bringing together the actors so that they will work together, working on nature-based solutions. So in the project, the processes at the different sites already have started, and they are at different stages right now of this innovation process. So as the other sets or the demonstrator cases are still work in progress, we have the ISA case where you could already take some lessons learned. So we already could identify also together with the work at the sites, at the demonstrator sites, we already could identify some of the success factors that when stakeholders collaborating, working on nature-based solutions in living labs for their cases. So what is very important about successful work? It's that you have flexible, open-minded authorities, then polycentric governance structures and deep stakeholder involvement. So it means also for the governance giving away a bit of power, but it helps then together with the stakeholders finding good solutions and also implementing them and gaining acceptance and also a feeling of ownership. Then other important factors is also building trust and confidence among stakeholders between the different four sectors. And also it's important to provide exchange, learning opportunities, also listening to different opinions and different views. That is also very important. And also one of the important lessons learned is that actually the co-creation of multiple benefits are important when you really work on nature-based solutions and want to implement them. So a good example is the ISA case. So where there was really an important aspect when implementing nature-based solution was also creating benefits for the society, such as recreation opportunities or attractive scenic qualities. So as I know, we have very little time. So that's it for me at the moment. So if you have questions or if you want to learn more about it, you find my email address, you find the email addresses and contact information of the FUSIQUAS team or project lead. And if you're interested in, feel free to ask us, contact us. So that's it from my side, and I'm happy to receive questions. And also if you want to learn more about it later, feel free to contact us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Gerd. Very, very interesting and great to start to see some transdisciplinary research coming into nature-based solutions, conversations and circles. So I think I want to ask you first of all about this process that you mentioned about sharing lessons between the different cases. So would you mind talking briefly about this process through which, for example, this success case, through which the other cases might learn about what happened, what worked and what didn't work?
So basically, you see at the ISA case, so we say it's a good practice example, and one of the things that we do is also we invited the other cases to come to the ESA to have a look and exchange also with the stakeholders. So, and you see, so at the ESA, it's a success model, but it really takes time building trust. And the nice thing, for example, what you also could see, so we had people there that really were opposing at the beginning, but now they are the best friends, and they made a very nice presentation together, showing the stakeholders what is actually important and where to learn, and especially is building trust and confidence between the different groups also. That is very important, and this was, I think, a very nice way of sharing the experiences.
That's interesting. You know, sometimes we encounter skepticism about the role of participation to kind of overcome existing hierarchies. But what you're pointing to is a kind of power of a process itself to kind of move beyond some of that initial kind of staking out of interests and so on. So yeah, thank you very much. Hopefully we'll get the chance to come back to your presentation in a bit. But now it's time to move on to our next presenter, Marina Melanidis, who, thank you for getting up early this morning, Marina. We're beaming in from British Columbia. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks so much. And it's not too early, so no worries. It's really good to be here. Hi, my name is Marina. I'm a master's student at the University of British Columbia. And today I really want to explore the role of social sciences and NbS research and share with you all the framework and approach that I've developed for my thesis, which is exploring key questions around governance and success of NbS initiatives. So we know that NbS is this emerging term. It's really gaining in popularity. And we heard today from both IUCN and from today's first session that key to the NbS definition is that NbS benefits human well-being. So social goals are really core to the concept of what NbS is. But there are still some knowledge gaps in NbS literature right now around areas that are key to achieving these social goals. Governance, especially areas around or questions around knowledge and participation. So with that in mind, I really want to draw your attention to why social science research really matters in the context of NbS work. That would be the top center column of my poster. And I want to start by explaining that the environmental social science literature shows us that we simply will not achieve our desired ecological and climate outcomes without addressing socio-political factors and without incorporating human well-being. This literature also shows us that participation is really a necessary element to addressing these factors, and it's really necessary for conservation in more general to be effective in the long run. But despite this, social science insights are really a key gap in NbS literature right now. So it's pretty exciting to hear some of the other posters that are using social science methods. But what it means to be missing social science insights is that the questions that social science methods are really good at exploring are not really being answered. So these are questions around governance dimensions and social outcomes mainly. And there's also not really a whole lot of empirical studies that are examining the implementation of NbS using social science methods and metrics that are more place-based and context-specific and qualitative. So in moving forward, I think we need to really encourage more social science research in this space. And we need to encourage some more empirical studies, especially those that are exploring what meaningful, active and reciprocal collaboration with diverse actors looks like. This requires relationship building, it requires trust, and it takes time and resources that don't always result in quantifiable metrics. So these are some challenges or maybe some expectations that we'll need to be able to overcome in order to do this. So my research is really building from and contributing to 3 sub-bodies of the environmental social science literature: environmental narratives and governance, climate change adaptation for conservation, and climate change adaptation success. And I've identified some of the key learnings from this literature here on this poster. But my objective is to examine how the pursuit of NbS through applied climate adaptation for conservation initiatives specifically by different actors is linked with different visions of success and different views about key governance considerations. I'm interested in questions around what success really looks like for different actors that are involved in NbS. What challenges are they facing and what solutions are they identifying when they're implementing NbS projects? And how do different kinds of partnerships and engagements shape how different kinds of knowledge is being considered or integrated into NbS projects? So to shift you over to the right column of my poster to explain the methodology and approach a little bit. I'm taking a case comparative approach. And I'm doing this because I want to address the lack of empirical studies from social science in the NbS research. And the 3 case studies that I'll be exploring are cases from the Wildlife Conservation Society's Climate Adaptation Fund portfolio. And these will all be cases that are biodiversity conservation projects that are intending to address both climate adaptation, but also explicitly intending to address social outcomes as well. And the case studies are all different in the ecosystems that they're working in. They're working with different types of people, and the nature of those partnerships are different. And I have 3 examples below there, and you can see the first one will be possibly a riparian restoration project in Montana that's working with Indigenous communities and governance on a really co-development level. Another one might be an urban river resilience project, so it's in an urban space, and it's working with local governance, municipal governance, civic groups at more of a collaboration or consultation level, for example. And I'll be doing mostly semi-structured interviews with people that are involved and are affected by these projects. So that includes project staff, that includes those that were consulted if there was a consultation, and that includes those that are designated as the recipients of the benefits of these projects as well. So to sum up, we know that NbS approaches are inherently place-based and context-specific, and we know that social outcomes are inherent to their definition and to their success. We also know that there are significant gaps in insights, mostly from the social sciences, which results in missing answers to questions that social sciences are really well suited to explore. So questions around governance and participation and knowledge especially, which are all key for NbS to be effective. So my research will address some of these gaps, and what I anticipate the impact of this to be is that I'll be able to identify some best practices for this field that is growing quite rapidly in order to encourage NbS projects that work for climate and work for ecosystems, but also really work for people. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Marina. Really great stuff, and I'm obviously a huge fan of work that seeks to address this gap of social science in nature-based solutions. I can only encourage people to get in touch with you and ask you questions about your process, hopefully inspire others to get involved in social science for or in spite of nature-based solutions even, right? My question, I think, and excuse me for taking some kind of executive privilege, imposing my own question, but is, you know, we've got this kind of solutions-orientated language or frame, right? Nature-based solutions. And when we think about social sciences, it's not always the case, but in some cases, we get this sense of a critical paradigm. And if you saw some of the session earlier on the social dimensions of NbS, that was really emphasized, right? This critical paradigm, and for example, the role of an environmental justice lens that would always kind of place the center of focus on conflict. So I was wondering how whether you've encountered this kind of problem versus critical kind of dilemma, if you like, in your work, or if you've encountered as someone wanting to bring in questions of power, how that's been interpreted, I suppose, in NbS circles. Hope that question makes sense.
Yeah, kind of. I think I'm getting the gist of what you're asking. Power in politics plays a significant role in shaping the outcomes of environmental challenges and their proposed solutions. We know this from the environmental social science literature, especially the literature that's exploring governance in trying to address environmental challenges. And this is something that is quite dear to my heart as well, and it's something that I'm looking at all the time. And while I haven't started the data collection process for this work yet, I'm really, one of the reasons why I wanted to choose case studies that existed at sort of a range on the spectrum of nature of engagement is I'm curious about whether or not aspects around politics, around power, that can be associated with different kinds of ways of engaging with people, with different kinds of people as well, different groups of actors. I'm wondering if that impacts the way that these projects end up being implemented and the way that the folks, the people, the groups of people that are involved in these projects understand the way that these projects are being implemented and whether they understand how successful these projects were. So these are questions that I have seen a little bit. However, I would say that I would like to see more, a bigger exploration or a more thorough, deeper exploration of the role of power and politics in the NbS literature specifically. And I'm hoping that my work can be, can contribute to what will soon be a much bigger sub-body of literature around the role of politics and power in NbS approaches.
Yeah, me too. And I would agree with you that I think comparative case study is a really powerful method that is not used enough. So I wish you all the best. And anyway, we'll probably have the chance to come back to you. We've got about 15 minutes left and one more presentation. So now I will move swiftly on. Thank you so much, Marina. So now, last but not least, Linjin Shear from the University of Durham. Over to you.
Thank you, Stefan. Also, many thanks to the organizers to give me this opportunity to share my work. So here I would like to introduce a paper that me and my colleague, Professor Harriet Bulkley, wrote and published in the Journal of Environmental Science and Policy. And this paper comes out from a part of our Nature Vision project work, which explores nature-based solutions contribution to transform urban biodiversity governance. As we all know, we are now in the run-up to the COP15 of the Convention of Biological Diversity, and in the preparation of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. One key agenda is what role can and should be played by the local and subnational governments. So our paper here contributes to this debate and tries to build the evidence base concerning how cities are currently making a positive contribution to biodiversity goals through NbS. So the idea is to examine current NbS practices in Europe in terms of their biodiversity goals and actions, and the data we use for this research comes out from a database called Urban Nature Atlas, which was developed by the Nature Vision program in 2017. This database recorded up to 10 NbS from 100 European cities. The first results include in total 976 cases. And the database contains detailed information of each NbS in terms of its project goals and objectives, key characteristics, and their direct impacts, etc. So based on this information, we were able to identify those projects that have explicit biodiversity goals and actions. In total, 351 cases were found. Among them, we further selected 199 cases that are associated with 3 different types of urban settings for more in-depth analysis. Details can be seen from the bar chart on the left. In terms of the analytical framework, we adopted a conserve, restore, thrive framework to explore cities' contribution to biodiversity through NbS. Conservation and restoration are fundamental elements to the CBD, and more recently, that conserving and enhancing nature's contribution to people is increasingly highlighted. Therefore, besides conservation restoration, we also examine how cities work with nature to thrive with nature. So in terms of conservation restoration, we analyzed each NbS for the type of its biodiversity goals, which means whether it is genetic-based, species-based, and or ecosystem-based, as well as the specific actions undertaken by NbS to achieve such goals. In terms of thriving, we draw on the studies on the diverse and multifunctional benefits of NbS to identify nature's contribution to people along 5 dimensions, which are cultural, social, economic benefits, as well as benefits for addressing climate challenges and for improving environmental quality. For the full table that summarizes the analytical framework, you can also later refer to our paper. So what did we find from the analysis? Here I list 4 main findings. The first and the second is clearly showed in the first bar chart on the right, that urban NbS prioritize conservation and thriving over restoration. And in terms of when NbS focus on the bodies of water, they are placing equal attention on restoration. The third key finding, as we can see from the second bar chart on the right, is that cities are focused on the whole urban ecosystems and pay less attention to species diversity. and only very few projects that has goals and actions towards conserving and restoring genetic diversity. The fourth key finding is that cities are setting quantitative targets for their biological efforts. For example, the number of trees to be planted, etc. So what these findings tell us, first, we would like to emphasize that there are great potentials for current and future NbS to address urban biodiversity challenges. In our analysis, 351 out of 976 NbS have explicit biodiversity goals and actions, which means that there are more than 600 NbS that do not explicitly address biodiversity. Meanwhile, as we have shown, species and genetic diversity received far less attention than ecosystem diversity. So urban NbS need to further integrate biodiversity goals and actions, especially actions that emphasize species and genetic diversity. Second, recognizing the ways in which biodiversity is pursued in cities through NbS is critical if these efforts are to be scaled up or mobilized globally. So therefore, the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, which is currently under drafting, should incorporate the goals of conserve, restore, and thrive the cities pursue in their biodiversity efforts and use smart targets to better engage cities. And that's all, thank you.
Great, thank you very much for providing the counterbalance to the social science that we've seen in this poster, and now for some biodiversity knowledge as well from the urban context as well, which we haven't seen so much of yet in the conference. So the question then is about opportunities, like where can we get the most biodiversity gains, or if you've seen through your review, if there are particular kinds of nature-based solutions in cities that deliver really the maximum biodiversity gains. Is it, for example, in parks or in green roofs, or is that not even an appropriate question to be asking, because really we should take a kind of broader view, not just focus on the individual project?
It's a very interesting question, and I would say that it is one of the reasons that we analyze more in depth in NbS cases in 3 urban settings, rather than like focusing on one urban setting. Like here we focus on large urban parks and forests, as well as rivers and community gardens. So in that sense, we try to understand how NbS are working in that NbS associated with different ecosystems. So in ecosystems or urban settings are working for biodiversity. So in this analysis, we did not look at like how much biodiversity benefits that one type of NbS can deliver. So I think it is very difficult to make the assertion that parks are contributing most to biodiversity. And what we try to highlight is that NbS, no matter in which ecosystem or in which urban setting, has the potential to contribute to biodiversity. And what we encourage here at the end of the paper is that there are huge potential that are currently missing from not only from the global biodiversity framework, but also from the urban planning and urban design, urban development sectors. So the key is to understand these potentials and also try to integrate these biodiversity goals and objectives into urban NbS. Okay,
thank you so much. So we don't have a lot of time left, unfortunately. We've had the chance for kind of a great insight into these different processes, both in research and in practice. So I'm really grateful for the 6 of you for giving us your insights, this really hard-won knowledge and lessons that we can all learn and draw from. Now I think, because we only have 6 minutes left before we hand off to the next session, I think I would like to give each of you 1 minute to have a say on something which I think is really underappreciated, which is, what would you change about NbS in order for it to work better for people and for biodiversity? Or is the NbS vehicle, you know, the vehicle that's working as it is making sure NbS are working for people and for biodiversity? Or is there something fundamental that you would like to see change about the frame of NbS in order to make it work better for both biodiversity and people? So do you want to each take a minute to try to answer that question? Shall we start with Annie?
Sure. Yeah, this is a question that I thought a lot about. And I think it plays in with the poster that I presented as well. I think NbS has so much potential to integrate this socio-ecological system, to you know, shift something in people's minds in this time of climate crisis, you know, health crisis, whatever you want to call it. NbS has the potential to resituate humans as a collaborator in the projects, not apart from nature, but rather as a part of these multiple elements, assemblages, as Anna Singh would call them. So I think that what I would like to see is the frame to be shifted to these collaborations. Right now, we're not there, but I think we can get there.
Okay, yeah, great answer, and thank you for providing it so succinctly as well. So Karl, can I pose the same question to you? Do you think NbS need to be transformed, or is the vehicle working for people and biodiversity?
It's a really broad question. I think what I can say is I think that, reflecting also back on some of the talks earlier in the day, just an increased focus on not only providing benefits, but also increasing people's awareness of those benefits, and making sure that, you know, benefits support the things that people care about, the people living around the NbS, that are interacting with the NbS, that we rely on, you know, for the long-term sustained success of the NbS. So we heard earlier about, you know, different kinds of incentives, and really, you know, focusing more on that and moving beyond this kind of assumption that, you know, we're all aware of all these co-benefits that are provided by NbS. The public is not necessarily aware of all those co-benefits. Things like carbon sequestration, things like, you know, all the regulating ecosystem services that aren't so salient. So if you plant the trees, you know, that helps with water infiltration, that can help reduce flooding, like we saw in the Leeds case study. You know, not everybody knows that. So actually investing in that kind of raised awareness of the benefits, I think, can go a long way for the sustained success and continued uptake of NbS.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Really good stuff. I look forward to seeing this all come out further in future work, and I'm sure it will, according to all of the work that you've been doing as well. I'll just, we are really now cut for time, so I'll just pose that question to one more person then. Lin Jin, I'd like to get your perspective on that question, if that's okay. Do you think that the NbS concept is good as it is, or does it need transforming in order to work better to deliver for biodiversity?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some space that this concept can develop, or it is like currently there's a debate about how to tie NbS more closely to biodiversity. So people are saying if a nature intervention that doesn't contribute to biodiversity, it doesn't count as an NbS. I think that's really make points, especially in an urban setting, like you have mentioned, that this discussion, especially in the cities, is currently kind of like not much. And I would really love to see, because I think like our paper has shown that there's great potential in cities. Normally cities are regarded as the threats to biodiversity, but on the other hand, it also holds great potentials to contribute to the global biodiversity governance. So I think highlighting that, especially integrating this biodiversity into urban NbS, that can help to like fulfill or to fulfill this kind of potential and to contribute to the overall biodiversity goals.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And thank you again for being succinct. I will pose it to the others actually. So really, really succinctly, Gerd, do you want to have a crack at it, the question? Do we need to transform NbS, or are they good as they are?
Very, very good. So one point that I could tell from the cases that we are analyzing is really that it's also important to have these hands-on, these exchanges with others. And also the learning process is very, very important. Also, if people see, actually it's always a discussion about evidence. So if people really see a good example like the ESA, it's a good evidence and a good thing to learn, hands-on exchange. And this will really, I think, promote and help us implementing nature-based solutions.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And Marina, do you want to have the last word on the question?
Last word, wow. Real quick. So people are a part of nature, they're not apart from it. And sometimes I think like the definition of NbS, especially that last bit where it benefits human well-being, it feels like nature is simply a tool that we can wield, or that people are placed simply as an outcome rather than a crucial part of the NbS projects from beginning to end, and of natural systems as a whole more generally. So how do we change this? I think we need to open up the discourse. I think we need to actively invite diverse voices and perspectives and transfer leadership of the narrative to different people. And I also think we need more, as a social scientist, shameless plug for social science. I also think we need more social science that is looking at empirical studies and meaningfully exploring how we can collaborate in ways that promote equity and reconciliation.
Yeah, fantastic, great to end. So then just a couple of administrative points. So I'd like to say thank you, first of all, to our 6 speakers. Thank you so much for joining us for this poster session. Really, really incredible insights. And I encourage everyone to follow up, find your contact details online. And I know that there have been many questions that have been posed that we didn't have the chance to address to you, so you will have the chance to address those as part of the follow-up to this session. But now we must hand off to the next part of the conference. So thank you very much, everyone, and to the audience for keeping with us. Cheerio. Bye.
Many, many thanks, Stephen. Thank you so much, Claire, Annie, Gerd, Karl, Marina, and Linjun. Thanks for sharing your really interesting and timely work. I've learned a great deal this afternoon. Thank you. And thank you, Stephen, for excellent moderation. I know we could have probably gone on for a whole other hour there. But we're just coming to our final session. I'd like to reflect on all that's been discussed and debated today and wrap up the second day of Nature-Based Solutions Digital Dialogue. I warmly welcome Karen Sornberger to this webinar. Hello, Karen. Lovely to see you. Karen is a biologist working from the European Commission in the Biodiversity Unit. After working in the European Parliament and 10 years in the Research Department of the European Commission, she has joined the Environment Department in 2007. So her portfolio includes health and biodiversity climate change links with a view to promote ecosystem-based approaches to climate change adaptation and mitigation. And she has been the EU negotiator for biodiversity and climate change in the frame of the Convention on Biological Diversity. Thank you very much, Karen. Over to you. You may share your screen now.
All right, I'll try to do this. Hang on a second. Bear with me. So I share the screen, and then can you see it now?
We can see you, but we can't yet see your screen.
And now?
No, not yet.
I only see my screen now, nothing else.
Okay.
If not, I mean, it's just a few accompanying slides. I mean, they are not, if they can be shared afterwards. I mean, because you had a very long day, so I probably just start talking and then you might see it in the back. Yeah. First of all, thanks for the organizer to giving me this opportunity. It's a pleasure and an honor to share this virtual podium with you and provide some reflections on nature-based solutions in the European Green Deal, and notably with the idea of investing in nature-based solutions for a resilient recovery. I think actually this fits perfectly after your long deliberations of today and yesterday, where you showed what nature-based solutions are, what they are not, and making it clear that implementing nature-based solutions is in a way working with nature, with people, for nature and people. The COVID-19 pandemic has clearly shown that climate change, biodiversity loss and human health are interdependent. All those emergencies are a result of our broken relationship with nature. The global dimension of the COVID-19 crisis, the breadth of its threat to human societies, and the life-changing impact it is having on practically all humankind will certainly have a very lasting and potentially world-changing effect. In this unique context, many voices advocate that a sustainable and resilient economic model should be a key focus of the recovery phase. As major global shocks and threats, such as biodiversity loss, climate change, and pandemics, largely feed on one another and therefore must be addressed jointly in an integrated manner. One could actually say there's an increasingly vocal drumbeat for a resilient recovery from COVID-19. We need to design the way out of this planetary emergency. We need a systemic change, and we need it fast, as scientists are warning us that we are getting dangerously close to potentially irreversible cascading tipping points in the Earth system, which potentially could lead us to a hothouse Earth, which is unlivable for human beings. How leaders decide to stimulate the economy and allocate capital in response to the crisis will either amplify these threats or mitigate them. There is a risk making nearsighted decisions that increase emissions and continue to degrade nature, whereas now is the time to invest in nature, phase out fossil fuels, move to a circular economy, and accelerate the transition to resilient, low-carbon economies. The recovery from COVID-19 is a chance to repair the economic and financial and natural system, building a regenerative economy that does not further destroy our life support system, but contributes to heal it, contributes to conservation and restoration of ecosystems. It restores the biosphere, it gets CO2 out of the atmosphere, it reduces emissions and increases resilience, all this while providing jobs and business opportunities. Investing in nature protection and restoration, investing in nature-based solutions will hence be crucial for a resilient recovery. When restarting the recovery, it is crucial to avoid falling back and locking ourselves into damaging old habits. We have been in an emergency even before COVID-19 started. Now, the European Green Deal brings all key environmental challenges on par and calls for landmark transformational actions aimed at future-proofing our economy to ensure the well-being of societies depending on it. The European Green Deal, together with the policies it announces, including the Circular Economy Action Plan, the Zero Pollution Ambition, the Climate Law, and the EU Biodiversity Strategy to 2030, are our commitment to a resilient and sustainable future that leaves no one behind. The dedicated Green Deal call under Horizon 2020 includes a theme on biodiversity and ecosystem services. The European Green Deal also follows the do no harm principle, that it has put ecosystem protection and restoration at the very heart of all its initiatives. I don't know whether you see my screen. In the meantime, you should see a flower where you see all these initiatives that are all together form the European Green Deal. And now these initiatives are not to be seen in isolation, but they are like one big puzzle. And the no to harm principle is the principle that goes across all the initiatives. The planned partnership on biodiversity under Horizon Europe will have a dedicated working area to further increase the evidence base for the deployment and development of nature-based solutions. Actually, consecutive European research programs have supported research and innovation in this field, and some of which have been presented to you today, and I probably think, or maybe already yesterday as well. They have very well advanced our knowledge in this area. The European Green Deal is the EU's growth strategy. the new growth strategy, which will be the compass for recovery to ensure the economy serves the people and society and gives back to nature more than it takes away. We know that overshoot days falls into August. In our present times, we need to push the overshoot day back, that it comes closer to the end of the year, and ideally we need to recover nature. The biodiversity strategy is to bring back nature on a path to recovery by 2030, but I come to this later on, just in a minute. However, some sectors of societies are betting on COVID-19 to push back the current climate and environmental ambition, or indeed the whole Green Deal approach, think that now we cannot afford to do it. First, we have to restart the economy. So in fact, the scale and duration of the economic recession will be decisive, because conceivably people will first worry about their jobs and wages and livelihoods before any thought about the wider state of the planet. So we really need to manage that through investment in nature-based solutions, we unfold job and business opportunities in order to stem the recession and the unemployment wave. When investing massively with public money, the recovery packages we speak about, sums of money that haven't been talked about for a long time. We need to do it right the very first time. We will not have a second chance. The major investment efforts that will be needed for recovery should be oriented towards sustainable practices and new green jobs that bring a sense of a new future and a transformative society. They will help to transform the society. Now there's the opportunity to start over and scale up and step up the implementation of sustainable ways, the implementation of nature-based solutions. The EU Biodiversity Strategy that was adopted in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, 20th of May, 2 months ago, it will be a central element of the EU's recovery plan. It will be crucial to prevent and build resilience to future zoonosis outbreaks and to provide immediate business and investment opportunities for restoring the EU's economy. As the COVID-19 also has clearly shown the interlinkages between our health and the emergence of zoonosis. So with the destruction, continued destruction of the environment, had actually led to an increase of the potential of the emergence of zoonosis. So it responds, the biodiversity strategy responds to the urgent need for action at all levels. It's crucial to prevent and build resilience to future outbreaks and provide immediate business and investment opportunities. While the objective to put Europe's biodiversity to recover by 2030, the strategy sets out ways to implement existing legislation more effectively and also includes new commitments, measures, targets, and governance mechanisms. There are 4 main elements, if you want to summarize the new biodiversity strategy in 4 headings: protect nature, restore nature, enable transformative change, and lead for a global ambitious biodiversity agenda towards an ambitious post-2020 global biodiversity framework. And you can see that actually nature-based solutions is like the red thread through all these 4 elements. On international level action agendas, such as the Climate Action Agenda, the Sharm el-Sheikh to Kunming Action Agenda for Nature and People, there are coalitions such as the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People, such as the Nature-Based Solutions Coalition, the Coalition for Adaptation and Resilience, and initiatives such as the Planetary Emergency Partnership, Champions for Nature, 1 Trillion Trees by the World Economic Forum. All these efforts, I mean, that's what gives hope at this very crucial moment. All these efforts seem to converge, and they stress the multiple benefits you can achieve through the implementation of nature-based solutions, and they see the jobs and business opportunities. They see actually that by investing in nature, this also makes economic sense. It's our lifeline for the future. The natural capital investment, including the restoration of carbon-rich habitats, climate-friendly, nature-friendly forestry, sustainable tourism, is recognized to be amongst the 5 most important fiscal recovery policies which offer high economic multipliers and positive climate impact. So the interlinkedness of our challenges also means that the solutions can also be interlinked. And nature-based solutions with its multi-benefits is a very good example of how we can integrate our recovery efforts. The recent lockdowns due to the COVID-19 pandemic have shown us the value of green urban spaces for our physical and mental well-being. The promotion of healthy ecosystems, green infrastructure, and nature-based solutions should therefore be systematically integrated into urban planning, including in public spaces, infrastructure, green walls, green roofs, the design of buildings and their surroundings. That's one major element in the EU Biodiversity Strategy. So we want to bring nature back to the cities and reward community action. The Commission calls on European cities to develop ambitious urban greening plans by the end of 2021. This should include measures to create biodiverse and accessible urban forests, parks and gardens, urban farms, green roofs, green walls, tree-lined streams, urban meadows and urban hedges. They should also help to form the connections between the green space. We do not have to create islands, but we need to make sure that these spaces are interconnected. Actually, sometimes it's also about doing less of a harmful activity, like we should use less pesticides, limit the excessive mowing of urban green spaces. And we think that these plans should mobilize policy, regulatory and financial tools, because all this in order to implement all this, we need to invest in all this. And at the moment, there's tremendous sums are freed for investing into the recovery. We need to take urgent, concerted and collaborative actions to reconnect with nature. And this reconnection with nature, as more and more people live in cities, we've heard this during the day, cities can actually play a big role for the solution. They've often been seen as the challenge, and they are the challenge, but as there's many more and more people living in cities, that's also here where the solution starts, because here we can start working, taking actions on ground level. And by doing this and scaling it up, we build a resilient and sustainable global economy that incorporates nature at its heart. So we need these bottom-up approaches, and then this will be matched by the top-down post-2020 biodiversity framework and other international, multilateral and regional and national agreements. So we need to do this now, or even the more so as we build back from the COVID-19 crisis and the economic and social shocks it entails, and it still entails. I mean, we are just at the beginning of this. We are just coming gradually out of the immediate health threat in these parts of the world, in Europe, but there's the big unemployment, the big recession tsunami that's still ahead of us. So we need to be ready, and I think nature-based solutions are ready for use and are easily accessible. So there is a tremendous potential in really getting started fast. Turning the tide of biodiversity loss will only be possible if our entire society embarks on a deep, rapid, and transformative change, from trade production to our consumption and lifestyles. And again, this is a bit like I think it's a bit like a sandwich model. We need to have the bottom-up initiatives, activities, and in order to make them durable, so very often good projects, once they're finished and they're finished, they need to be then embedded in ambitious policies and regulatory frameworks in order to make them last. And we hope that through the biodiversity strategy, the European Green Deal, that we have the common framework in order to make this happen. The recovery plan proposed by the European Commission that is currently debated by the EU member states, the plan proposed recognizes the fundamental role that nature plays in our society and economy. It states that protecting and restoring biodiversity and natural ecosystems is key to boosting our resilience and preventing the emergence and spread of future outbreaks. That's written in the recovery proposal of the European Commission. As already said, this transition to sustainability is urgent and necessary. However, we should not see this as a threat, but it's also a huge economic and social opportunity. We still have the choice, but if you listen to science, all these recent assessment and IPCC reports that have been published over the last 2 years, it's also clear that the window of opportunity is closing fast. This decade, 2020 to 2030, must be the decade for action. each year, each choice, each half degree matter. We have 10 years starting from yesterday to make the transition, not to think about how we do it, but actually to make it happen. It's an enormous challenge, but it's a very good challenge, and we have all the means to achieve it. We need to act boldly now and invest and implement technological and nature-based and societal solutions to stem this planetary emergency we are in. As already said, biodiversity is our lifeline. Sustainable is the only viable option for a future in prosperity. We know what we have to do, but the question, the key question is, will we do it in the time available? We have a very serious timekeeper. Nature is our timekeeper, and there will be no bailouts with nature. We need to learn from and work with nature. In nature, nothing is wasted, and that's kind of taken up in the idea of a circular economy. The European Green Deal and its initiatives, including the EU Biodiversity Strategy, provide a compass for such a resilient recovery. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Many, many thanks for those very thoughtful observations, Karen. Really interesting to hear about the huge potential for transformational change in Europe, especially that mediated by nature-based solutions, and especially given the crisis in which we currently find ourselves. And thank you very much also in your presentation for drawing together some of the key themes that we discuss across our various panels today. So thank you very much for helping us bring the second day of this event to a close. We're grateful for your time and engagement with us. Okay, well, that's it for today. Thank you to all our wonderful speakers, our moderators and poster presenters. Thank you all for your time, for sharing your work and diverse views with us. And thank you also for our audience for joining us today, and for all the many great and challenging questions you posed. We never have time to answer everything during the webinars, but we are very much committed to doing so in follow-up. So please do keep your questions coming. We look forward to welcoming you back tomorrow when we will be discussing the financing and governing of nature-based solutions, starting with Justin Adams from the Tropical Forest Alliance, who will reflect on days 1 and 2 and set the scene for tomorrow's talk. Good evening.